vest. I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
And that is exactly that's exact position of the PEB recommendation felt. They were like, oh, afraid that you'll disrupt commerce in America. Take this.
Yeah. That's the point. If it was convenient, then that wouldn't count then. The whole point is to be inconvenienced.
I mean, look, the oligarchs have been inconveniencing Americans for the better part of 2 generations. The policies that were passed, particularly during Reagan's administration and Clinton's administration, have had untold amounts of damage to this country, whether it starts with obviously firing the air traffic controllers, whether it is the removal of the Fairness Doctrine or the reduction of our top marginal tax rate, whether it is NAFTA and normal trade relations with China, whether it is the Telecom Act of 96, or the ultimate, which still doesn't get talked about enough, is the removal of Glass-Steagall, which just completely gave free rein to Wall Street and the major banks to do whatever they wanted. And they're still doing it now. And it just seems to get worse and worse and worse. And everyone knows that it's almost like a sinking ship. It's like we're on the Titanic and we got to get off. And there's just too many people that are not recognizing that without labor being strong in this country, we are doomed. We are completely doomed. And you can't drink oil and you can't eat money. At some point, somebody's got to ring, the alarm bells and say something's got to be done. I just don't know who's going to be able to do that. But I do think collectively building a national labor movement, even a national labor council, as we've talked about, I think that's something that could be of great benefit. How do you guys see it?
So there's a slogan in the working class movement, in the struggle, which says it's our solidarity versus theirs. And if you look at the solidarity that they have, the National Carriers Conference Committee, they didn't divide up. They didn't have the different class ones go this way and that way. Also, the Republican and the Democratic Party are more or less in lockstep. The vote wasn't that skewed like it was 30 years ago, but we didn't actually go on strike. Had we gone on strike, the vote would have been way, way, way more skewed. It was 400-5 30 years ago to basically break that strike/lockout in 1992. And so there's a huge amount of solidarity with employers. The Chemical Shippers Association actually was critical of the rail industry in a rare glimpse at a break in solidarity of the ruling class. But notice that they actually led the coalition of shippers, hundreds of them, that basically said to Biden, you're going to have to make sure this strike doesn't happen. So even though they kind of let it slip that they wanted the class ones to give those proletarians a handful of sick days, when push came to shove, the shippers all lined up with the rail carriers, the rail carriers that have given them lousy service for years now, they lined up with them. And so we see the solidarity on the part of capital is quite impressive. Now let's look at our solidarity. We have 12 different unions on the railroad. Supposedly we were in one big rail coalition for the first time in history, and the rail unions bragged vociferously about this in June when all 12 were in the same boat. We didn't really have a coalition. It was nonsense, because as soon as the PEB came out, everyone went in everyone's different direction. And there was some vociferous cries from the rank and file, but we were told very quickly by the union leadership, no, fellas, this is all within the playbook. We had decided in advance every union has the right to settle on whatever terms it wants, which in effect is saying that every union, every craft has the right to scab on their fellow workers on the railroad. We have inherited a craft union system that is 150 years out of date. In the 1890s, it was out of date. There was an attempt by numerous railroad union leaders and most of the rank and file at the time to create an alternative vision and an alternative structure called an industrial union, where all railroad workers would be together in a railroad workers union. For various reasons, it failed, largely because the solidarity of the ruling class was so powerful. The federal government conspired, sent in troops, shot up a bunch of strikers. They blacklisted ARU members. They arrested the leaders, threw them in jail, confiscated the files, and so forth. But that's another story. But the point is, there's not going to be a successful illegal strike at this point on the railroads. We've had successful illegal strikes in this country. Talking about illegality and strikes in the larger context, obviously, sitting at Woolworth's lunch counters in Greensboro, North Carolina in the 1960s, in effect was a strike, in effect was illegal, and that changed the way the country run. And as my old friend Ann Feeney, a labor folk singer, used to sing, nothing changes if you don't break the law. And in fact, so many of the laws in this country that once were the law of the land would now be considered quite illegal and immoral because people challenged them. So the miners challenged Jimmy Carter in 1978 and refused to work, despite the fact that Carter invoked the Taft-Hartley Act and attempted to order them back to work. Subway workers in New York City have violated the Taylor Law on 3 occasions, I believe, in the last 50 years, which says public employees can't strike. We saw Arizona teachers, West Virginia teachers, and I think Oklahoma teachers in the last 5 or 6 years engage in illegal strikes. The Postal Workers Union was organized in 1970 through an illegal strike. So it can be effective, and it can right a lot of historic wrongs. And we may see an illegal railroad workers strike at some point in the future in this country, but it ain't going to be today or tomorrow. And that's partly because the rank and file and the leadership are not on the same side on this thing. The leadership of our unions wanted this contract, attempted to sell us this contract, and you had a sizable chunk of the rank and file who voted in favor of this contract. You need a consensus. You need to build a majority, and you need that solidarity. One of the things that Railroad Workers United has been emphatic about since our existence over the last 15 years is that you need to have all railroad workers united together so that we can act in concert with each other. Having these 12 different craft unions all going in their own silly direction is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for weakness and division. It's not a union. We have 12 clubs on the railroad, and that's what people have to understand. A union is all for one and one for all. An injury to one is an injury to all. We don't really have that on the railroad right now, and that's step one. We have to have a unified workforce on the railroad that can act as one. And until we get it, we are going to continue to operate with one hand behind our back. And I'd love to hear Matt Weaver talk a little bit about the All Railcraft Coalition, which was an attempt to build a sort of a prototype of what could be done potentially inside the rail labor.
And that was in the last round of bargaining when I was in the internal organizing group of the BMWE. We had all craft coalitions around the nation: Kansas City, Toledo, Chicago, Detroit, Miami, San Antonio, across California. And we had at one point in time 11 internal organizers across the nation doing this cross-craft sections, working with all crafts. I mean, I had never seen a fireman and oiler, the local laborers, before I joined that and met up with a group in Roanoke, Virginia. You know, that cross from the ground up, from the rank and file, was very powerful, and also to make happen. But boy, it was well worth it. There was a lot of hours poured into that, but the returns are hard to be seen, though, because how do you put a monetary value on it? This latest PEB recommendation imposed agreement was better than the contracts, but is it what makes the working class strong? I don't think so.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.